JBR Podcast.
Wake up and check it out.
Where the music and life connects. Let's go.
So today I'm sitting down with Jack Lavin, a true cornerstone of the blues scene in Canada. He's not only known for his killer bass playing, but also for his pivotal role in shaping the music venues in Vancouver like the iconic Yale. He wasn't just a witness to music history, he was part of it. So welcome to the show, Jack. Where do you want to get started in talking about your fabulous music journey?
Oh, man. Chronology, maybe? Start at the beginning and work up?
Let's do it.
Okay, well, I was born into a musical family. My dad played, my mom sang, my brother played, my sister as well. We used to get together in the dining room once in a while, a few times a year, and all sing and play together. That was kind of fun. I've been playing stringed instruments, ukulele, guitar, etc., bass. I started when I was about 6. Picked up on ukulele. Picked up a guitar when I was about 10 or 11, and picked up a bass when I was 15. And left home that year and went out into the world. I went to San Francisco from my native Chicago, and wanted to join the music scene there and get some free love. And so I was a hippie there for about 3 years. I remember the first year away from home, I caught John Lee Hooker, who was famous for playing rent parties. There was a head shop in the Haight that was going under. They were called the Mystic Eye. So John Lee stepped in like he always did. What a great guy. And he played a benefit for them. He sat on a folding, like a card table chair while he was playing. And behind him, he had a band of hippies. They were called Foxglove. Now, I believe they knew what a 12-bar form was, but they didn't know anything about John Lee Hooker because he does not play by the rules, as you know.
Yeah.
So at one point, I'm looking at him, and he's leaning back in his chair like this, trying to see the band behind him, going, where the hell are you guys? I'm right here, and you guys are nowhere near with me, you know. He just made his changes wherever he wanted to. He had to have ears to play with John Lee Hooker and be ready to move when he did. They did not know that. Anyway, that was I was still very impressed with his playing and his voice, and he was killing me, and he made a lot of money, and that head shop stayed open for quite a bit longer than they would have had they not had that kind of help. Also that year, that would be 1968, a buddy of mine took me, he was much older than I was, and he got me into this place called the Matrix, which was on Union Street in the Marina District of San Francisco. Charlie Musselwhite was the featured act that night, and I sat about 3 feet in front of his 1956 Fender Bassman, Tweed 410, and just took a bath in his sound. It was just amazing. I didn't know any of the guys in his band. The bass player was a fretless guy, fretless Fender Precision. And after the first set, Elvin Bishop walked in wearing his trademark overalls. And he put on his guitar, and I saw him going through all the pockets on the bib of this overalls, these overalls. And I knew what he was looking for, so I stood right up. I had a Fender medium tortoiseshell pick in my pocket, and I said, Mr. Bishop, are you looking for one of these? And he reached out and he said, oh, thank you, son, he said to me. And then he just played the greatest set. They took another break. In walks Mike Bloomfield with his big hair all up and everything like that. And he didn't play that night, but I saw him and Elvin were sitting at a table for two with a blue spotlight beaming down onto them. And I thought, oh, if only I wasn't a poor hippie and was armed with a camera, that would be $1 million shot. Anyway, that was eye-opening evening. A piano player named Steve Miller sat in that night, not the Steve Miller, but there was a local guy who was very good, And he sat in with them, and the greats were coming and going. I was quite amazed by all that. That same year, I got into a show at the Fillmore West. This was before it had moved to the Carousel Ballroom, I believe. And the top billing was Traffic with Steve Winwood. But opening the show for him was John Hammond. He was a solo act like he usually is, sat there playing a big acoustic guitar and singing his butt off and banging his foot on the stage. You would think he had a kick drum or something. They must have maybe had a mic down on the floor by his foot. But it was the drivingest, heaviest sound I'd ever heard one man make ever. And I thought, oh, man, I got to meet this guy someday. Well, that did work out many years later, but that's for later. But he made a huge impression on me. Then in 1971, the scene was dying in San Francisco. Everybody was getting busted, and there were narcs everywhere, and all the good pot smokers, a number of them had turned into speed freaks and heroin addicts, and there was rip-offs and all kinds of bad stuff going on. And the move was get out of the city. Everybody was going to communes, and I ended up in Wolf Creek, Oregon, southern Oregon, about 60 miles inland from the coast and about 80 miles north of the California border. The nearest town was Grants Pass. I spent 2 winters and most of 2 summers with these people. They had a house that had anywhere in the winter that we'd be down to maybe a dozen or 15 people, and in the summer we'd have as many as 50. And there was gardening going on, and we'd go into Grants Pass. Everyone, if you were going to be in the commune, the first thing that they did was enlist you in the food stamps program. None of us really had an income, and in order to survive, we had to have something to eat. And you'd get your food stamps on a monthly basis, and they'd all go in the pot. And we had a big flatbed truck, and it would go into Grants Pass, 20 miles south of us, on shopping once a month or maybe a couple times a month, and get staples, and somebody was the cook. We had no electricity, no telephones. There was no hot running water, just cold from a gravity-fed spring uphill from us. And we got by okay. It was kind of fun. And there was some electricity down from the main house in a shed right by the road where we would go jam, and there was a number of musicians there. Towards the end of my stay there, we were actually getting some gigs, roadhouses and barn parties and so forth. That was lots of fun. Then that band, we had a band in Oregon called Pete Moss, and we got one of the guys was from in the Bay Area, and he said, there's this concert and we've been invited to play. We can open for a band called Osceola featuring Peter Tork of the Monkees. And equipment was provided, and we just had a hell of a time. It was my first big concert that I played. It was at the House of Good, which I'm not sure, but it might have been the original Fillmore West on the corner of Fillmore and Geary. By that time, the Fillmore had moved on to the Carousel Ballroom on Van Ness and Market Street upstairs. That was a big one. And then while I was in the Bay Area, me and the guitar player, a buddy of mine, Terry Prong, who I met in '68, I heard some pretty cool electric guitar coming out of a second-story window. And I yelled up, "Hey, you playing the guitar up there?" And he stuck his head out, and I said, "Man, let me up. I want to meet you." So he buzzed me in, and he was living in the Raposo Hotel, not far from the place where I was living. And I said, "You got to check my situation out, man. It's full of hippies and beautiful girls, and you would love it." And he went and checked my situation out. Sure enough, he moved there 2 weeks later, and we were friends for the next couple of years playing music together. And when I moved up to Oregon, he followed me up there, and that we continued to play. Anyways, he and I went down to Fisherman's Wharf to busk, and we were doing okay down there. Just the two of us playing acoustic instruments, and that was lots of fun. Later that year, this would be about 69 or 70, there was a company in Portland, Oregon, about a couple hundred miles north of where we were, called Denny's Music, and they sent a flyer out to all the communes and all the hippies that had moved from California. Got this thing. Have you got a song or two, an original? Come record for free in our studio. So we got into the VW van and trucked on up there, and they put some good instruments in our hands off the wall. I got to play a real Fender bass for the first time, and I think we did 4 recordings. I've still got them. I dubbed them down from cassettes. They don't really stand the test of time, but they were not bad for kids. So that's then I started in 1971. My family came out from Chicago. Actually, my mom and dad had moved to Iowa by that time. They were living in Iowa City, Iowa, where they had got jobs at the university. And they came out to visit my brother, who was living in Vancouver. And me and my girlfriend drove up. We were living in Reno at the time. And we drove up to meet the family. And that night, after the oldies went to bed, my brother and I went and sat in at a bunch of nightclubs. And it seemed to me like, I was good enough to play with these people. And it got in my mind at that point, I've got to move to Vancouver where I could actually make a living being a musician. Never happened in the States. And so I went back to Reno, and that was the end of my association with this gal. And then I bounced back and forth between Vancouver and San Francisco for the next couple of years, just kind of wandering around, being a nomad, playing where I could. And I got into the strip clubs in Vancouver, the Zanzibar, Izzy's, the Kit Kat Club. They all were peeler bars. And it seemed to me like in those days, if you had a peeler bar, the law required you to have a live band. There was no, dancing to tapes or anything. It was all live music. So everybody had a gig, and the gigs were 6 nights a week. And if you got $75 to 90, that was about for a week, you could kind of make that work because rent, I rented the second floor of a whole house for $75 for the month. So between the rent and the food, I didn't really have any other expenses. And so it kind of worked. Well, that was my first 5 years away from home. The next 5, I began touring with the likes of Doc Fingers. And I went up to Terrace and met Frank Soda from the Max Webster Band and so forth. And we did some, and these again were, half of them were peeler bars and half of them were like cabarets, legit dance clubs. And they paid a little bit better. And being on the road, that was a good thing because all your meals were in restaurants, as you well know.
Yeah.
So between 74 and 79, early that year, I got together with, early in that period, I caught Carrie Bell and the Chicago Blues All-Stars playing at the Commodore, and I had to meet Carrie Bell. So I went backstage and found Carrie, and I said, "Hey, man, I know you're here for 3 nights, and what are you doing in the daytime? What would you like to do?" And I was wearing this outrageous cowboy shirt. It was orange and red and yellow. It was the gaudiest thing you'd ever seen. And he said, "I want you to take me to where you got that shirt because I want one just like it." I said, "Well, that's great." Meanwhile, I'd arranged a jam session up near at the end of Lonsdale Street in North Vancouver, where the forest line began. There was an old hunter's lodge, and some of my friends were living there. And we ended up, at first I took him to the Army and Navy, and for $7.90, he bought the shirt that I was wearing. He found one in his size. And then, everybody was smoking pot in those days, and we kept passing it to him. He said, no. You take me to the liquor store. I'll get something for me. So he got a bottle of Silk Tassel whiskey, and he had that with him, swigging the whole time. And He got pretty high. Up the mountain we went, a balcony overlooking the whole lower mainland. The view was incredible up there. And we began jamming and everything. I remember he said, "Oh, I got this new song that I wrote. It's called I'm the Man from the Sun." And we kind of jammed on that for a while. It was very cool. And down we came. He played at the Commodore again that night. I got in for free with him that time. Around that time, me and Doc Fingers and drummer Jeff Eyre, you probably know Jeff, huh? Great drummer.
I remember, yeah.
We got a house gig at the Spinning Wheel, which wasn't known for having live music. And we were there 6 nights a week, and they were paying us $235 each for the week. So my pay had kind of doubled or tripled from the Peeler days, and that was great. Plus, Doc, being the master gig getter, he managed to wangle us a free meal, a dinner with that. So we'd meet at the aquatic center. We called it the Doc Fingers Health Club, and do some swimming, and then ride our bikes over to the Spinning Wheel and do some playing. And we were having a good old time. I've got pictures of that. About towards the end of 77, some friends of ours formed a band called Prism, and my brother and I were in that band. He on rhythm guitar, and I was on bass, and we recorded their first album at, I believe that was at Can Bass, which had been Mushroom Records on West, what was that, 6th, where it was is not too important. But that was interesting, being in the studio and making this album. A little later, I went to Chicago to go back and see friends and hear some real blues. And while I was back there, I got a call from home. Chuck Berry is playing in town. Do you want to play bass for him? Oh, I cut my Chicago trip short just like that and flew home in a big haste and got with Chuck Berry. The first thing he did was I saw him get out of the limo in the back of the Vancouver Coliseum. 45 minutes late, the crowd was going nuts. And they said, "Do you want to meet the band?" And he said, No. Let's talk about money first. So he had his briefcase with him. They went in the back room, counted $7,000 into his briefcase. Then he came back and said, "Okay, now I'll meet the band." And the first thing he said was, "Who's the bass player?" And I raised my hand. "I'm the bass player." He said, "When I look at you like this," and he did this to me. He said, "I want you to do one thing and one thing only. I want you to go boo-boom, 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 and only one note." And I went, "Okay, I could do that." "Who's the drummer?" And my brother was the drummer. He says, "When I do this," and he clicked his legs together, and my brother went, "Rap." He said, "Oh, you've played with me before." No, he hadn't, but he was pretty smart. He knew what he was doing. Then we went onto the stage. They had forgot his towel and his glass of water and everything. So he hands me his ES 335 Gibson, and I'm standing there in front of this crowd in the Coliseum. Everybody's roaring, and he's gone. It seemed like 5 minutes. It might have been 1 minute, but he came back and he had his towel and his glass of water, and we began to play. And he was so full of shuck and jive. I'll tell you, we could have played 35 of his best known songs. He chose to play a dozen songs that no one in the band had ever heard and no one in the audience had ever heard. And every time we blew a change, he'd look back and kind of snicker and, "Oh, you guys aren't so cool," you know. And for the second, I don't know, quarter of, or about a quarter of the show, he divided the audience in half and got them to sing "My Ding-a-ling" to him with his hands on his hips, and a contest to see who could be louder. He was the one getting entertained. Oh, that was really something.
That's funny.
I went to music school that year, Vancouver Community College. The the campus that was on 12th and Cambie, long gone now, and tried to learn to read music. But my dad had it right. He said, "You'll never learn to read music. You can already run. You're not going to go back and crawl again." So I learned a few things there, but I didn't learn to read like I was hoping to. In 1977, I had met Willie McCalder maybe a year or two before then, and I thought, man, this would be a cool guy to play with. So I got in touch with him. He was living in South Vancouver at the time, and I said, "Hey, man, you want to get together and maybe we can compare some notes? I could learn some of your songs. Maybe we can do some playing together. I know some good drummers and stuff." And so I met him, and we did some practicing in the basement, picked up on some songs that we could do together. Around that same time, a drummer, Brady Gustafson, who's originally from here in Victoria, had told me he was the house drummer at the Spinning Wheel back where I had played with Doc Fingers a year or two before. And he said, "I've got a week coming up, and I'm wondering if you want to play it and help me fill out the rest of the band." And I said, "Okay, that'd be great. We'll get Willie McCalder for piano." And my brother, who was still playing in Prism, they were doing a little bit of touring. I thought we would, I gave him a call and seen if he had that week open, which he did. So down we all got together at the Spinning Wheel, and the chemistry clicked and it worked, and we got a week there, and they wanted us back real bad because the attendance was great. And we began to play there regularly. And before you know it, there was a lineup, and then we had a new name. It wasn't the Willie McCalder Blues Show anymore. We were called Powder Blues. And that was the beginning of that. At the end of 79, we recorded our first album, Uncut. And that was, we solicited the major record companies. My brother was the business guy. He did most of that. Nobody wanted to touch us because we were playing blues. They figured, a blues album, they'll sell 5,000 copies at the most, and then it'll be done. Well, we sold 15,000 copies because of my friend Bill Raylan and his job at A&B Sound on Seymour Street. He was in touch with all the record outlets all over BC and Alberta, and he began to hype our album, and that's how we sold 15,000. Then we went back to the record companies, and they fell all over each other trying to outbid. We ended up with RCA, and they distributed our album nationwide, and it was a big hit. And we did some touring in the States during the first 5 years. That was kind of interesting. I remember a tour that began with the Juno Awards. This would be about 1980 or 81. And then we had an extended tour, a lot of dates in America. And one of them was in Philadelphia, and we were opening for Taj Mahal, who I was a huge fan of. That was the first time I met Taj. And so we opened the show for him, and during the break, he came over and said, "Hey, you cats are pretty cool. I'm going to do a solo set, and then for my last set, do you guys want to back me up?" And we went, "Yeah." So it was great, man. And everybody in that place, it was called the Bijou. Everyone knew every word to every Taj Mahal song ever written. They were the biggest fans you've ever seen. And I was amazed when he did his solo set. Practically the whole house was singing right along with him. And he got a big kick out of having the band behind him for the third set. And of course, we really enjoyed playing with him. And that was the first of many times that I got to hang and or play with Taj. Also on that same tour, we ended up down in Austin, Texas, opening a show for a guy named Stevie Ray. That's all that we were told. And this fellow, we played our opening set, and I went back to the dressing room, which was now full. It filled up with a rack that had probably 15 Fender electric guitars in it, mostly Strats. And here's this guy wearing a funny flat cowboy hat, sitting back in the couch, and I sat down next to him, and I said, "Hey, man, what's going on?" He said, "Yeah, you guys are pretty cool. Mick Jagger told me that I'm the best guitar player in the world. I'm going out with David Bowie next month, and we're opening shows for the Rolling Stones all across Europe. And I went, oh, yeah. You know, you hear all kinds of stories on the road. I wasn't ready to believe this guy yet, although I was impressed with his Strat collection. So out he goes on stage, and that was the best show I think I ever saw up until that date. He wanted it so bad. He was like Howlin' Wolf or somebody, crawling on all fours at one point with the guitar, feeding back and dragging on the stage. He kicked out all the jams, and we were so knocked out. And my brother was never the same after that. He needed a bigger amp, and he needed to be way louder, and it was hurting my ears. Anyway, that was pretty cool. And so then from we were up to about 78. Oh, right before the Powder thing took off. We were still doing the Willie McCullough Blues show. We were up at the Savoy in Gastown, and Big Walter Horton was in town playing Rohan's Rock Pile across town in Kitsilano. And I had to take the night off, and Willie was really pissed at me for doing that. But I had a good sub who knew Willie and was from Edmonton like Willie, so I was covered. But I couldn't miss Big Walter. So I went down there to see him, and he had an all-Chicago band. Richard Molina, a Mexican guy, was playing guitar, real good. He had Playboy Vincent on drums, and I forget who his bassist was, maybe Fuzz Jones, I'm not sure. And after the show, I got to talking with him, and I said, hey, man, what are you doing? My usual line, what are you doing tomorrow? I could take you around. We could do some stuff, eat some food. He said, oh, man, we got food poisoning yesterday, and everybody in the band is not feeling very well. I said, well, come to my house for dinner tomorrow night. My wife will cook us a roast or something. Oh, they like the sound of that. Well, that night my wife cooked a roast. It was as tough as shoe leather. Those poor guys. But during the day, we went to see Portland Al over at 3rd and Main, his record store. And Portland Al was just gassed. Big Walter, he said, oh, man. He got out his Polaroid and took some photographs. We played the Savoy Powder, and Elvin Bishop sat in with us. And we were getting an encore at the end of the night. And my brother, who had a bigger amp than Elvin's, was playing solos right over top of his. We're getting this encore, and Elvin said, hey, Tom, if we go back for an encore, do you think I could have a solo? Anyway, back in Chicago in late 79, I went back again, and I caught this band on the south side. The club was called the Broadway Club, and it was in a black neighborhood. And when the owner saw me and two other white people walk in, he ran over. We sat down at a table. He ran over. He says, when you leave, you let me know, because I will walk you to your car. It was not going to be safe. So we got to hear Big Leon Brooks, a wonderful Chicago blues harmonica player, little known, unfortunately. He was wonderful. Homesick James on guitar and vocals, Kansas City Red on the drums, playing a minimalist drum kit. Calvin Jones was on bass. Kansas City Red had a snare, a bass drum, a floor tom, a hi-hat, and a ride cymbal. When I got back home and told Powder Blues drummer Durris Maxwell about this kit, the very next gig he showed up with exactly that, and that's all he ever played for the rest of the time he was in Powder.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say there with Durris, I remember the first time I played with him, I thought he was still setting up.
That's right. Yeah.
He had a snare and a kick drum and a hi-hat.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, that's all he really needed. That guy was really
he
something.
blew me away.
And he'd tell you about it.
Absolutely, he sure would.
So the next 5 years, from 80 to 85, 1980, 81, 82. In 83, I left Powder Blues. Oh, but before I did, we did some touring through Canada and a little bit into the Northwest. We played in Seattle at the Showbox, an old beat up. It used to be grand, but it was pretty run down by the time we got there. We were opening for Willie Dixon, and I got to sit down with Willie. This would be the second time. The first time was at the Commodore at that Chicago Blues All-Stars show. But this time, I had the wherewithal to say to him, Willie, you're the greatest songwriter in all of blues. How the heck did you manage to write all those wonderful songs? And he said, well, I got a secret, he says. He reached in his sports coat. He says, I always got a little stub of a pencil like this one, he said, and, you know, a napkin or a matchbook or whatever will do for paper. And I will... if I hear something on the jukebox that I like, or listen to some conversation or whatever, anything that reading the paper, I get a good line or whatever, I write this down and I put it in this pocket in my sports coat, he said. When I get home at night, I have a desk, and in the desk is a drawer at the bottom. It's a big one, he said, and I empty my pocket into this drawer with all these matchbooks and napkins and so forth. He said, then when I get in the mood to write a song, or when somebody says, hey, we got an artist needs material or whatever, I open that drawer, I take a handful of the stuff, and I throw it on the desk, and I spread it all out and see what I got there. He said, it really makes it easy to write a song.
Wow.
Yeah. And I took that to heart. Yeah, that was amazing. He was such a nice man. 81, Powder Blues won the Junos for the best new band. Played with, this is a funny story. I was playing as the pit band for the Vancouver show, hosted by Wayne Cox and Pia Chandel. And I was in the green room they wanted to put some more powder on me. I guess I was looking too shiny under the camera. And this Doc Fingers was leading the pit band, and the secretary the receptionist in the front room brought me the telephone. It was before wireless. It had a long cord on it and a rotary dial, and she said, somebody wants to talk to you. And I thought, who could know I'm even here? You know, I thought, this is really strange. So I pick it up. Hello, this is Robert Cray. I go, hi, Robert. He says, our bass player is going to probably not make it to our show at the Savoy tonight. Could you come down and take his place, you know? I said, well, I'll be glad to. I'll be there. So I went down to the Savoy and played the first two sets with him. It turned out that they were there for, I guess it was 4 nights. And Richard Cousins, the bassist for Robert Cray, had a jealous wife or girlfriend who made him come home to Everett, Washington every night, made him commute. And his VW Bug broke down on the highway on the way to the gig the second night or third night.
Shit.
And he did manage to get it towed and fixed, and he got up there. So he arrives in time for the third set, and he said, man, thanks for saving me. How much do I owe you? And I said, man, you've had enough troubles for one day. This one's on the house.
That's cool.
But I could just see them in their hotel room going, God, Richard isn't going to make it. We don't know any musicians in this town. Who are we going to get? And they're watching TV, and they see me on the Vancouver show, and they're going, well, this guy isn't too bad. He could probably do it. So that was the first time I got to meet Robert Cray. And then I did some playing at the Savoy with John Hammond, backing him up. I guess we opened the show. We began the second Powder Blues album, Thirsty Ears. I wrote a bunch of stuff for that. And Sonny Rhodes came to town around that time. Sonny Rhodes was a wonderful guitar player. We played Harpo's in Victoria and a lot of dates at the Yale. He was really cool. Did you catch him? He'd perform with a turban on his head. He was very flamboyant, and a 3-piece, one flamboyant color suit. And so in the fall of 83, I left Powder and I began playing with Jim Burns. We did some touring. Big Joe Duskin came to town. He would come up from Cincinnati and stay for months at a time. And boy, did we have a great time. We played Expo 86 and everything. During this period, I formed the first of the Demons band, the Checkered Demons, which I named after a cartoon character from the Zap comics, the underground comics from my earlier days in San Francisco. The Checkered Demon was this guy. He wore just checkered trousers, and that's all. And he had a face that kind of looked like a pig. S. Clay Wilson, I believe, was the cartoonist. And I asked S. Clay if I could use the illustration of this cartoon character, and he wrote me back. I still have the letter somewhere. He said, a lot of people have asked me over the years if they could do that, and I've always told them no. He said, but on the back of this letter, you'll see a whole bunch of original drawings by me that can be bought, with price tags and everything. Anyway, but I used the name Checkered Demons. He couldn't really patent that against a band. That was the name of a cartoon character. And we did that for a while. Tim Hersey was playing guitar with us. We went through a few different drummers. Sometimes Chris Nordquist, Brady Gustafson was there at the beginning, the original Powder Blues drummer, and opened for Big Mama Thornton. This is a good story at the Commodore. We did our opening, and I came back to the dressing room covered in sweat, and I sat down, and in walks Big Mama. She's got a wicker shopping bag, a giant one, with her, and she looks at me and says, was that you out there on the stage just now? And I said, yes, ma'am, it was. She says, man, I ain't going out there now. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, you already done tore the people up. Oh, man. Well, she put her bag on the table, and I could hear bottles clinking inside, and she pulled out 2 26ers of gin and 2 quarts of milk. She says, that's my drink, gin and milk. She says, the gin's for my head, but the milk is for my stomach. Well, she had ulcers, and she died only less than a month after that. She was gone. I'd seen the pictures of her. She was big. She was huge. And when I saw her, she couldn't have weighed 120 pounds soaking wet. She had just shrunk right up. It was sad. But she went up there out on that stage, and she tore the people up again. She whipped them, and it was an amazing show. And yeah, I was so glad to have met her. What a great lady. Pee Wee Creighton, a disciple of T-Bone Walker from Los Angeles, came up and played with us at Mama Gold's. He was amazing. He used to do a show where he'd walk from table to table and play a little bit of guitar for everybody in the restaurant. Al Walker was playing with me in those days, and Al said his dad was in the crowd, and Pee Wee walked up to this one table and played a little bit and said to the guy, "You Al's daddy." And the guy wasn't Al's dad. He's nodding and he's going, "Yes, I'm Al's dad." He was so delighted.
That's great.
I got with Amos Garrett before this 5 years was out, and we did some touring. Amos was traveling with a wonderful harmonica player by the name of David Bergen, who is also a real character, a pool shark, and just an amazing guy. He was from the Bay Area, and he made an album or two with Roy Rogers, the guitarist who was working with John Lee Hooker in his Coast to Coast boogie band. That was pretty neat. And then John Lee Hooker came and sat in again. This was before I left Powder. I got some shots. He walked in and announced we were opening for B.B. King, and we were in the middle of a song, and out he came, and we began to do the boogie for him, and he began dancing, and then he sang a song or two, and I got some shots of a surprised me playing behind John Lee Hooker, which
wow,
I didn't know I was ever going to get to do. Okay, we're on to the next 5 years. I've got some notes here. I'll just move them a bit. So in 1971, going back a ways, I was still bouncing around between Oregon and San Francisco and Vancouver. And in Seattle, I had a buddy, a piano player named Dave Lanz. And he was friends with the notorious Jeff Simmons, who you know well. And Jeff used to work with Frank Zappa band when he was in his very early 20s, and made 3 albums with Zappa. And he was a brilliant musician. He could play anything, any instrument, piano, guitar, bass, drums, harmonica, you name it, he could kill on them. And we had a jam in the basement and everything. Well, I got to know him a little bit, and around this time, I began bringing him up to play some gigs with the Demons. We were no longer the Checker Demons anymore. We were the Whalen Demons with Al Whalen Walker. Had joined Tim and me and the drummer du jour, whoever that. Oh, by that time we had Rex Fugard, little Rex, who had played with Al Walker in the Whalen Walker band. And Jeff was a kick in the head. He was very interesting and did a bunch of stuff. Backed up Taj Mahal at the Commodore. I put together the entertainment for the first and only, as far as I know, Vancouver Blues Festival, which was held in Maple Ridge. And I had hired the great Lowell Fulson, who I had met at the Anchor. That's another story I'll have to get to. Also, Amos Garrett and Big Joe Duskin were the headliners, and a bunch of locals playing underneath them. It rained. It was a date in July, and the promoters said that it hadn't rained in 80 years on that date. That's why they chose it. And it rained, but only for about a half an hour, and no one left. Everybody took out some plastic bags, and the rain went away, and it was a great show. I have recordings of that whole thing. John Hammond came to the Yale, and his show was fantastic. No band. We got to back him up. We became good friends. We went on a double date that time and spent a lot of time hanging together off stage, and we became dear friends. Pine Top Perkins came to the Yale for the first time, and we got to back him up. He was crazy, man. That guy lived to be 97, smoked and drank hard liquor every day of his adult life. He never got sloppy, but he would, after ending a song, he would do something like play a little snippet of something like da 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 ba 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 ba. Or he'd play just little ditties just for a few seconds, and by the third night, the whole band was ready for that, and we played it right along with him. It was really lots of fun. He was pretty cool guy. And Fenton Robinson came, the brilliant blues man from Chicago who wrote "Somebody Loan Me a Dime." Snooky Pryor and John Nicholas. I played with them for 4 nights. We did New Year's Eve that year at the Yale. That was kind of fun. Mitch Kashmar came up the first time he showed up. He tours with War now, and the first time Mitch showed up, he had his own band. They were called the Pontiacs. They were great, and Mitch, what a wonderful harmonica player and a great guy, and we became pals, and he got to know my band, and he thought, well, what the heck? I don't have to drive all this way. I could fly up and have you guys back me. So we did that, and I made his first CD. He had one vinyl album out, and I said, let's make an album. So we went into the studio, and in 3 hours, we made his album, which he sailed on the tails of that for a few years, and got some critical acclaim. He told me, he said, I used to play, I'd have it in my car, and I'd go out in the parking lot and say, check this out, man. This is a Canadian band backing me up, made this album. And his American buddies would go, what? There's guys in Canada who can play blues like that? So we're moving on. I made an album with Wes Mackey that year in that 5-year segment. Went on tour with Jim Burns, opening shows for Robert Cray throughout the Pacific Northwest. I brought Shuggie Otis up. Shuggie is a guy my age who had an album out when he was 15. He was the son of the legendary Johnny Otis, who had a big band and was famous in the 50s. He's the guy who wrote Hand Jive and a bunch of other stuff. And so I invited Shuggie to come play the Fairview with us on Broadway, a club that you know well. And he came up and he was wonderful and he was a cool guy and everything. So on the strength of that, I set up a tour for him. We were going to start in Victoria at a place called Blues Heaven. And then we were going to do a couple dates at the Fairview in Vancouver. And then we were going down to the States and we were going to play in Seattle, Parker's Ballroom, and in Tacoma. There's a place called the Swiss, which was very cool. And we were going to end the tour at the Portland Waterfront Blues Festival. And when I phoned the promoter, who was the guitarist of the Paul DeLay band, Peter Damon, I mentioned, I said, would you like to have Shuggie Otis play? And he said, you're going to have Shuggie Otis? I hear he's not very reliable. And I said, well, I had him up for 3 nights at the Fairview and he was wonderful. And, I think he'll probably be fine. We're all going to. So what happened was Shuggie showed up with his wife, who was kind of like a bikerish gal, and she wasn't all that friendly. And we did the Victoria show went okay. But it was obvious to me that Shuggie was not the same guy. He was on something and drinking. And she was egging him on. And we got to the Fairview, and we had Marco Ibarra on drums with us. And I went to get Shuggie at his hotel. Shuggie wouldn't come. He says, no, I don't feel good. I'm not coming tonight. I said, man, that'll be the end of the tour if you do this to me. And so I told Marco, and Marco said, I'll go get him. And he stood in front of Shuggie. You got to come, man. Well, what if I don't? And Marco said, well, I'm going to have to drag you. Shuggie decided he better come along. So he showed up, and those 3 nights were not very good. And the date at the Parker didn't go great. And then we picked up Jeff Simmons, who's I told you about what a wonderful musician, well, And Shuggie had a Mesa Boogie amplifier. It was like something like 250 watts and a single Electro Voice 12-inch speaker. And he played so loud at the Swiss, you could literally hear him 8 blocks away. And Jeff left the stage holding his ears. Jeff was playing piano. He couldn't get away like I could. I went as far from that amp as I could get and could just about bear it. But Jeff said, that's it. I quit. I'm done. I'm not playing with him anymore. We got to the Portland thing, the pièce de résistance of the tour. It was going to be really good pay and everything. No Shuggie. He did a no show. So Peter Damon, the promoter, put us on. We had Vic Pollack on harmonica and Nordquist on the drums and me, and Simmons was gone by then. So we filled out the rest of the band with Paul DeLay's guys. We had Louis Payne on Hammond B3, and Peter Damon played guitar, and we played some music, and they paid us. And I got to say thank you, Peter Damon, for doing that. He was right, Shuggie was not to be trusted. I started a jam at the Cottage Bistro. My brother-in-law, Shelley Berg, one of the world's greatest piano men, came and sat in with us. I began working with Big Muddy Fraser, a great guitar player from Ottawa. I played the Comox Festival with Amos Garrett and Doug Somm from the Sir Douglas Quintet. And on the way home, Doug stayed at our house. His girlfriend, who was with him, said he never stays with people. But I had a shack out back. It was a garage that I converted with plumbing. It was really quite nice in there. And Doug Somm told us stories all night long. He was a man whose candle was lit at both ends. He was such a fireball. And he died just a couple months later. It was the first big droughts that had hit the Southwest. He checked into a motel on his way to a gig. The air conditioning failed at night. And in the morning, he'd had a heart attack. The heat cooked him. I was so sad to hear that. And I thought if anyone should write a book, it should be this guy. He had learned guitar at the feet of T-Bone Walker. And, oh man, he just had quite a life. I started the music at the Admiral Hotel in Burnaby, which is going big time these days. I understand everybody's getting gigs there now. And I did a couple of albums produced and played on for Marty Bernard, and one for you during a little earlier then. And I did some touring with David Vest, the wonderful piano player who had been in the Paul DeLay Band in Portland, Oregon. Originally, he's from Birmingham, Alabama. He's about 10 years my senior. I'll be doing a workshop with him on the 8th of October here in Victoria. They're going to do Tales from the Road and question and answer and so forth like that. David is wonderful. And what a piano player. David took us on a tour. We went to Medicine Hat and played at Highway 99 in Seattle, and the Edmonton Blues Fest, where I ran into Guitar Shorty, and that was a trip. He had made an album from a board tape at the Yale and never told any of us. And I found out somebody sent it. I said, "You're kidding." They said, "Let's hear it for Jack and the Demons." They said, "Yeah." So I said, "Send it to me, would you?" So they did. And sure enough, 8 out of 10 of the songs on the album are Shorty and the Demons. And he'd never told us. So I confronted him at the festival. I said, "Hey, Shorty, I hear you made an album without telling me." And he was like, oh, caught. He slinked off.
Busted.
Yeah. So Mark Dufresne came up and played with us. He's originally from Kansas City, a harmonica player, lives in Seattle for many years now. The Kingfisher, I began playing the Kingfisher because of you. You got me a gig there, and then we did some work, and then with Marty and everybody else, Ted, I'm going to be back there on the 18th of October for a reunion with Marty and the Blue Zebras. And Mr. Boogie Woogie. Were you on that gig? The piano player from Holland? Yeah. I thought so, yep. Yes.
Yeah, I was.
Got some pictures. Yeah, more touring with David Vest and Al Foreman I began working with for the last 8 or so years that I was in Vancouver. Before moving to Victoria, I played a bunch with Al Foreman. And began playing some with Brandon Isaac, wonderful Yukon Slim. And we still play together once in a while. I've been producing this whole while, all kinds of CDs. I've got 21 now to my credit and played on a bunch more than that. Since moving to Victoria, I've produced 3 CDs and play in the local pubs and clubs and do a nice concert every once in a while, and you're right up to date.
Yeah, no, that's good. So people can check you out at jacklavin.com. That's your website?
It is, yes. I don't keep it much up to date, but there's some good pictures and stories and stuff. And my gigs I advertise on Facebook. My local is called The Loft. It's a pub that hasn't been remodeled since it was built sometime in the early 60s. And I'm ever so comfortable. It's got a low ceiling. The acoustics are great. My band Rhythm Train is me and Ross Hall, my excellent drummer buddy. And then we have a stable of all the best guitarists and keyboard men and singers that live in this area that we parade in front of us.
Awesome. So before we close things down here, what's next for you? Do you have any projects that are lined up or?
Yes, I do. I do. Well, the 18th at Kingfishers with the world's greatest club owner, Ted Hume. And that'll be one night, October the 18th. It's a Saturday. And I intend to bring some Lower Mainland people my way and run you guys through the loft. If you're at all amenable, I would love to have you guys out here. I've had an album in the can for I don't know how long. When I met you and Marty and all that my own album took a back seat to all that, but I've got about 20 tunes that I can sift through, and I'm eventually going to put that out. Some of the stuff, the legendary Jerry Adolph is playing on the kit, and I wrote all the songs, and I'm hoping that before I'm too old, I'll put that out there, and it might just be a vanity project, but it might not. You never know about stuff like that.
Absolutely. I look forward to checking that out, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on here. And I would definitely be at your Kingfisher gig, but I will be in Calgary that weekend.
We're going to miss you, man. I'd love to have you sit in some.
Yeah. Sadly, I'm going to miss you because, you'll literally be 4 minutes down the street from me. So I'm not far.
Well, maybe we can meet before or after and, have a beer or, a bite or something.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to be in Calgary on the Thursday. So I imagine you probably won't be in town till probably after that.
Well,
but we'll connect.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But thanks again for being on the show, and we'll get some of your socials up and get people checking out.
Thanks for having me, James. It's a real pleasure yakking with you again, and I sure hope we get to share some more notes before I'm all done here.
We will. We'll do this again for sure.
All right. Take care, man.
Thanks. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.